Welcome to the Rise to Shine podcast with Noelle Custis, where we ignite the spark to discover your favorite self. It is time to get real, ladies. Hello. Welcome to the Rise to Shine podcast. I'm your host, Noelle Custis, and today I have a special guest joining me, Diane Sorensen. She is a transformational coach specializing in parenting and relationships, and she's also the creator of the Beautiful Behavior podcast and community. So with 30 years in early childhood education, a background in behavioral science, and certifications in life coaching and hypnotherapy, Diane has dedicated her work to helping parents and educators create more connection and ease in their relationships. So, as you know, as a fellow coach myself and mentor, I know firsthand the power of this work in not only transforming our children's lives, but our own. So, I am beyond excited to dive into this conversation today about all the things, parenting, relationships, how we as moms can feel more confident and calm. That's the key word here, and connected in this journey. So Diane, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Noelle. So happy to be here.
Oh, I am so happy you are here too. I have been actually diving into your podcast and I am loving it. So I'm really excited for this conversation. I know our audience is so lucky to have you here. And I'd love for you to just start by telling us a little about your journey and how you got into this work, because I know we have some shared paths in our stories.
We do. Yeah. So, well, first of all, I am a wife. I am a mother, a stepmother, a grandmother. So I have a lot of mothering in my toolbox. Um, and yeah, so my background, like you said, is in early childhood. And I worked directly with children as my time as a teacher, and then also as a behavior specialist. And I worked with also a lot of parents and educators in helping them create more connection and peace and ease in their relationships with the children in their classroom, with the children in their homes. And then now, as a transformational coach and hypnotherapy practitioner, I work, I support women really in feeling more calm and connected and confident in their parenting and in their personal growth. And so my journey through parenting, and my own transformation is really what fuel my passion for helping women thrive. And so I went from classroom really to coach. And that's kind of where our paths kind of intersect, is that we both had teaching backgrounds. And I implemented this relationship-based practice in my classroom in my later years in teaching, when I was going through some parenting challenges with my own children. And part of my story, and I've told this story, is that one of my children, when they were a teenager, was going through some mental health issues and was self-harming. And, that was really devastating as a parent. And so I delved into, it was kind of like, how did we get here? And I kind of thought, I don't know how we got here, and I need to figure this out, which I didn't even know what that meant. But I started taking information, and what I learned was I uncovered a lot of generational patterns, not just in my family, but culturally, and learned then how to start shifting those patterns. And really shifting from having so much focus on the behavior of my own children and the behavior of the children in the classroom to really working more on or focusing more on the relationship I was having with them. How was
Mhm.
I experiencing them? How was I responding and reacting to them? And that kind of started this seeds where I I started using it in the classroom as well as personally. And what happened in the classroom was just tremendous.
Mm.
And it didn't happen right away, but people started to notice a difference. They were showing up in my classroom and um, just observing and experiencing what was going on in there. And what I learned later on was people were like my supervisor would come in a course and supervise or and
Mhm.
observe like they do, and then she'd go back to the administration and say this classroom is different, couldn't explain it, really articulate it, you got to go experiencing it. So all of these people were showing up in my classroom, and the thing, it was really hard to explain, but how they were able to articulate it was by saying it feels different.
Mhm.
And it really was the experience. The culture of the classroom had changed. It wasn't that we didn't have conflict and upset, because we had a lot of that,
Mhm.
but it was the way that we approached the conflicts and the upset, where we weren't avoiding it anymore or trying to stop it, but rather we used those opportunities, those times,
Mhm.
to figure out, how do we move through a conflict? How do we move through this big emotion and upset? And the children learned not to fear the upset and the conflict. They actually learned to contribute, and what they were actually able to contribute at 3, 4, and 5 years old
Mhm.
was to breathe.
Mm.
And what we taught them to breathe, and what that did was it gave them something to do. It gave them
Mhm.
a way to contribute to this so they didn't have to fear it, but it also gave them a way that they were actually calming their own inner state.
Mhm.
And that changed the whole energy of the classroom
Yeah.
and empowered those little ones to be
Mm.
able to deal with the emotional conflict that they were experiencing.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I know, yes, we have that commonality that we came from a background in education, and there is something to be said about that with your experience as an educator and how it just shapes the way that we approach, even the work that we do today. And what a difference, because that is what led me on, part of what led me on my journey of, growth and growth mindset and emotions and how to deal with that. We were starting to do that as well. We were implementing it in the classroom. We were noticing a huge difference. And of course, then, bringing it home to our own children and wow, what a difference it made. And then when we start having other parents tapping in, going, something's different. Other teachers are noticing something's different. And I loved that you said that. It's like they couldn't put their finger on it necessarily at the time, but it was something's different.
Yeah, they could
And
feel it, which is
yeah.
so powerful.
Yes, yes. And the feeling that I got as an educator as I tapped into this was nothing like I had ever experienced before either. Just really feeling like we were taking things to a different level, and I was able, I mean, as teachers we have, I just think it's innately in us, we're just the caretakers, we're the types that, that's why we're in the classroom, is we want to make change and we want to be a benefit to kids. but I think even what I realized is that they were also seeing me as a human. And especially when I started working with middle schoolers, because I was in elementary and then I had moved into middle school, and taking those skills was a game changer. And then I became human to them. I was still teacher. There was still, there was still all of that, but the conversations, the communication, the feeling safe, for them to feel safe to express themselves and to know that, like, yes, there's frustration, but we can we can work on that. We can work with that, I guess is more like it. And so for me, gosh, again, so many things to unpack because I love this topic and I love that you've worked with children, but then now you are helping women to be able to work with their own kids. And what a different, I mean, again, this work does not just change a child, it changes us. And so, one thing I would love to ask you, I know that self growth is, and our personal growth is a big deal. And one thing I always say is that as moms, we are growing alongside of our kids. So, what have you noticed about that connection between parenting and our own personal growth through the process?
Yeah. So as I went through to do this in the classroom, I really had to go through my own transformation.
Yeah.
And I had to be connected with my own internal states and how
Mhm.
to regulate that. And what I didn't realize before that was I was just on an automatic pattern.
Mm,
And I wasn't really aware of my own emotion or connecting to it and working with it. And my daughter didn't have a way of expressing what was going on with her inside.
mhm,
And I'll be completely transparent here. In later years, she's growing now, and doing great.
mhm,
But we have these really amazing conversations now where she
mm,
can tell me, she says, Mom, I tried to tell you, and your response was, oh, you're fine, you're overreacting, da 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 da. And I
mm.
was like, oh, that's
Yeah.
true. That's our automatic, how many times do we say to our kids, you're fine, that's overreacting, it's not that big a deal. Why are you making such a big deal about this?
Mm, mhm.
And it's not our fault. It's
Right.
just a pattern that we have so much going on in our heads
Yeah.
that we're not often present to what's really happening in front of us.
Mm.
And I had to get real honest with myself. And
Yeah.
it was hard work. This isn't
Yeah.
easy work. And the results, when I talk about the classroom and even my own children, the results are so phenomenal. And
Mhm,
it's small shifts over time. But here's the
mhm.
truth. We have to do the work.
So good. Yeah.
This isn't about, I'm going to do this to get them to change. And to be honest, that was
Mm.
probably how I started.
Yes.
And what I realized was, wow, I am really starting to understand myself at a much
Yeah.
deeper level. And that has been life changing. And that's what
Oh,
I bring to
oh,
people because it
yeah.
is possible. And
Right.
that's what I want to bring here is that there is hope. It is possible.
Yeah. And I love that. And there's so many questions that I have in my mind just from that talking about this is number one, again, it goes back to that. Yes, we might see some changes in our kids and we're going, okay, well, how do we make them be like this at home? That's always how do we help them be like this at home? Well, it comes from us, and it's not just a behavior that all of a sudden, or, the way that they're going to act is just going to naturally happen at home. It's the work we as moms also have to do. And I think once we get honest with ourselves and we are in a position where we say, okay, you know what, you're right. I mean, it's just like I always said, when I would go to my kids, I would attend every event that they had, and I never missed a beat, and I was always a part of that. But how many times was I there physically? But my mind was somewhere else because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I have to go grocery shopping. I need to get this to-do list done. I have work to do. I've got papers to grade when I get home. And I wasn't totally present. And that even filtered in to once I caught on to that, that filtered into even when I was at home. And how many times did one of my kids come in and maybe want to talk about something, and I didn't just stop and really listen. It was more, like you said, those quick answers back. Even though I felt like I was a great communicator, we still, like you said, we just it's the patterns. It's not your fault. It's the patterns we've just been accustomed to. It's also what we've learned from our parents. I can't even tell you how many times, and maybe you've experienced this as well, where it's that breaking those cycles is that many of us are saying we're not going to parent the way that our parents did. How we were raised is not what we're going to do. But oftentimes we find ourselves doing a lot of those same things. So I guess a question would be for that would be, how do we break those generational cycles while still honoring our past and being able to navigate that? And then of course,
Yeah.
I have a couple more because I'm so thrilled about this conversation.
Yeah. So a couple of things. One is my brain is going to so many
Right? It's
different
there's
things.
so many directions we can go. And I'm
Um,
probably going to throw you another loop and take you in another direction too.
yeah, ask that question one more time.
So I know for myself, and I know even hearing my mom
Oh, the
with the
mother, the mother.
generational, yeah, it's
That's
the
right. Like,
and I do notice, I will say, because my grandma is still alive and I love her to death, but I also know how she parented, and my mom was adamant about, I'm not going to do it the same. And I definitely see that she did do things very differently. But there's still, there are still things.
yeah,
There just are, and the same goes for me. The next generation, I'm doing things a little bit differently, but of course, I still, go. So I guess my question would be for those that are really feeling like they came from a place that they want to break those generational cycles, but want to still honor how we were brought up. It's not that we thought it was necessarily bad, but times have changed and it's different now in how we parent.
yeah. So yeah, yeah. So the mom yeah, I was like, oh, I'm not gonna do it like my parents did.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be my mother. And the more, I could see more of my mother all the time.
Yes.
Like, oh, and the truth is I did pass on a lot of patterns, but they're invisible. You don't
Hmm.
even know them until,
Yes.
you kind of go, oh, this isn't working. So if something's not working, we want to look at that and say, okay, so let's do something different.
Hmm.
And the blame. So honoring our past. Yeah, this is not about our parents didn't do it right. We get
Yeah.
so into, oh, I got to do it right, or am I not doing it right? Well, did they not do it right? And
Hmm.
we all do it the way we know.
Yeah.
This is not about right or wrong. And the work I do, we do not put a right or wrong spin on it, a good or bad spin on it. It's where we're at, and we just
Yeah.
honor that. And again, I really want mothers to hear that if you're in a pattern that this isn't working, you're in a yelling pattern like I was, it's not your fault. And it is yours to shift.
Mm.
Um, and so my raising my children looked very different from my parents raising me, and yet
Hmm.
the same patterns were played out in different ways. So
Yeah.
one is, I'm going to say two words that often are said in the personal growth area, and that is self-care
Hmm.
and boundaries.
Yes.
Um, how we shift and do it differently is those two things.
Mm-hmm.
Having the awareness that we want to do things differently. So self-care, just like boundaries, isn't something we just do.
Mm-hmm.
This is a whole generational shift, and it's a
Mm.
process. And so one thing you can think about is so the shift
Mm-hmm.
here is rather than focusing on the behavior, because that is a pattern, that is how we've been trained and conditioned, is that
Yeah.
we focus on the child's behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So the shift is to focus on the relationship. And what does that mean? How
Mm.
am I relating to my kids? How
Yeah.
am I reacting or responding to them?
Mm-hmm.
Asking ourselves the question, how are my kids experiencing me?
Yeah.
How am I experiencing my child?
Mm-hmm.
And so a big shift here is that self-care. And
Yeah.
what does that mean? For
Mm-hmm.
me, I define self-care as caring for the turning the focus on ourselves and
Mm-hmm.
connecting to our internal emotional states.
Right.
And really, self-care for me is self-regulation,
Yeah.
as you are honoring a very deep part of you
Right.
that we historically, traditionally get disconnected from,
Yeah. Yeah.
because we've probably gotten messages. Nobody tells us you can't feel that way or don't feel that way, but there are just things that happen, that it's the message behind the actions.
Right.
Well, if you're going to act that way, go to your room,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So if I feel this anger or frustration and I'm expressing that, we get
Mm-hmm.
the message that that's not okay.
Yeah.
I can't have those emotions. Those I need to put a lid on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sadness, we get some idea that that's weakness, or don't be emotional, or
Right. Right.
whatever the message is, but we end up putting a lid on these.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a huge part of the disconnect
Mm-hmm.
in our relationships, and why we're feeling exhausted and overstressed and overwhelmed,
Yeah.
because we think to be good enough, to prove ourselves, to be acceptable to others, to be likable, we have to care for everybody else,
Mm-hmm.
not ourselves. I mean,
Right.
who got the message that, oh, I need to put myself first and then I'll care for you? Probably not
Yeah.
many of us.
Right. Right.
Um, and so, that was, especially as women,
Yeah.
we were trained, and not even consciously,
Right.
that we are to be caretakers. And part of that is our natural biological, we're caretakers, but
Right.
it's also a lot of our conditioning that,
Mm-hmm.
as women, we, historically, generations ago, women stayed at home, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
men went out and they did their job, and
Right.
then they came home, and the women take care of them
Yeah.
and the house and the children.
Yeah.
And then as we evolved and we're like, oh, I want more. I want to
Mm-hmm.
have a career. I want to make a bigger impact. I want to
Right.
contribute outside the home. I want to make my own money. And
Mm-hmm.
then we were able to do that, but then we're still doing all of the other stuff. So the
Yeah.
old patterns are still there. We've just added to them
Yeah.
instead of shifting the whole thing. And I think that's where we're at today,
Mhm.
is the need to shift, because we can see this. If we can't see it in ourselves, we can see it in the children,
Yeah.
right? Where I
Absolutely.
was in education for 30 plus years. And from the time I started to the time I ended, that would looked very, very different. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe teachers today need new skills to meet the needs of the children today. And that goes
Amen.
true for parents as well. And I think we
Yes.
think, oh, well, as parents, I should just know this. And
Mm-hmm.
absolutely not. The world has changed. We need new skills to meet these children's needs of
Yeah.
today. And
Yeah,
so we have to
because
meet our needs.
right. Well, and that's the thing because and again, you've probably heard this before, and you probably now hear this come up when you're working with your clients that I I always feel like there's moms out there, again, doing all of the things and still feeling like they're not doing enough or they're worrying that they're messing up their kids. I've heard that come up before, and so, it's helping moms release some of that pressure and some of that guilt that I always say, you are doing. And I look at my mom and, yes, when you talk about yelling, I mean, people laugh now because they meet her now and they're like, your mom yelled all the time. Like, I mean, my mom had quite the temper. It is not something that she hides. I mean, she goes, gosh, it's embarrassing to think about now, but at the moment, she was doing the best that she could in that moment. And then of course I look back and, my father passed away when I was 8 years old. So she was a single mom raising two kids on her own. She was the stay-at-home mom that had to then get into the workforce. And, life changed very quickly and very drastically. And it's one of those things that, I go, Mom, give yourself some grace. I mean, we go back and joke about it now, but I was like, you truly do as moms, even today, we have to have grace with ourselves, but also recognize that there are things that we can do. We can't take back the past, whatever that is, that guilt, all of the things, it doesn't have to stay with you forever. And that's part of that self-care, because I believe, like you do, self-care is so much more, I think that women hear this whole self-care thing and they'll say, oh, does that mean like a day at the spa? And I go, oh no, we're talking about so much deeper, because when I think about self-care, I'm like, self-care to me is definitely a place where, yes, you can go have a self-care day, but that's not going to change anything when you walk back into your life. Like, soon as you walk back into the door, you still have all the things. So the real self-care comes from the place where you're doing that inner work and you are doing things to help you navigate that when you walk through the door, you can, you have the tools and the strategy. So going into that, I would say, as far as, because I know you talk a lot about the importance of the emotional intelligence and how moms can not only help their kids, but like you said, help themselves. So, how can they regulate their emotions a little bit better? What are some suggestions from you in that?
Yeah. So you said a couple of things. You said
Yeah,
moms feel bad because they're like, well, how am I supposed to do self-care when I got all these things to do?
right.
And then the worry about messing up their kids. Okay,
Hmm.
so the worry about messing up their kids, part of that, the self-care is to um, be able to trust yourself,
Yeah.
right? Deeply, like deep
Good point.
inner self-trust. So that's part of the inner work. Um, Thinking that we have to be doing stuff all the time. Again, these are both patterns. That is a
Mm,
pattern that you probably got some idea or message in some, younger years of your life
right.
to not be lazy,
Yeah.
to, think about the things that you were taught not to be.
So
And
true.
that is
Yes.
where these insecurities lie. And
Right.
they will come up in our children because we'll
Yeah.
see it in our children and we'll go, oh, you can't be, da, da, da.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, we do feel guilty when we choose to create some white space in
Hmm.
our days to
Hmm.
create the space
Hmm.
that we need for perhaps some self-reflection,
Hmm.
um, doing a breathing practice or
Yeah.
some stillness practice, something to start the process of regulating our nervous system, bringing it down. Um, and I would invite the listeners here.
Mm-hmm.
The invitation here is that in this context, guilt is signage that you're going in the right direction. You're going in the direction of you. Because guilt is I've done something wrong, right? I've done something bad.
Right.
And we do feel like, oh, I've done something bad because I'm taking care of me, because that's not our pattern. And our brain's going to be like, this is not the pattern. This is a threat. You need to go back to this other way. And our brain will try to pull us back into the same pattern because our brain is a pattern making machine. And
Mm-hmm.
when the pattern is disrupted, our brain doesn't know that this isn't a threat to our physical life. It just
Mm-hmm.
feels emotionally uncomfortable. So
Mm-hmm.
it'll try to get us back. So I would invite you to sit with that guilt and know that I'm feeling this because I'm doing something different and it's taking me towards better wellness
Yeah.
for myself
That's so
and then
good.
for my children. And so what is something people can do? So I have a method that I call the stop method.
Okay.
And stop, S means, that's an acronym, S means
Mm-hmm.
stop, to
Mm-hmm.
stop ourselves. Now, here's what we often have been learned to do is we see behavior in our children we don't like, so we try to stop that, right? Or change
Mm-hmm.
it in some way.
Right.
And we have, even if we're not conscious about it, there's somewhere in us where that we believe that we can control our children's behavior.
Mm-hmm.
There's that cultural expectations that
Yeah.
parents are to control their children's behavior or to
Right.
be responsible for it. Well, one problem with that is it's actually not possible. So it's setting us up to fail right there.
Mm.
One human being does not control the behavior of another human being, even when we're an adult and they're a child.
Mm-hmm.
What we tend to do, why it seems to work, is because we manipulate or coerce or throw out threats. And in the moment, they have to acquiesce
Mm-hmm.
and comply to keep this attachment, which goes all into the old biological thing, which I won't go into. But in the long term, what happens? All of this behavior starts erupting because they're pushing down
Mm-hmm.
emotion. So we're going to shift that. The stop is to stop you.
Okay.
And so you stop. The T is take and tell. So the take is take a breath
Mm-hmm.
all the way down to the belly. Exhale it out. The exhale longer than the inhale, and that's just a practice. And doing that 3 times, there's a lot of scientific research that
Yes.
says doing that 3 times unhooks the stress response in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so here's the thing too, I like to say about taking a breath, because I think a lot of times people are like, "Oh, take a breath. And that's supposed to just, take things away. And it doesn't. And I would never say to somebody, just breathe, because that is like throwing fuel on a fire. That's
Mm-hmm.
like being dismissive. And the reason for the breath is because what's happening is you're having emotions inside, and that is energy in motion. So you've got all of this energy going in your body,
Mm-hmm.
and taking that breath is slowing the energy down on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is it slows the energy down on the outside as well, because we can't
Yeah.
see this energy, but it's felt. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what the people that were visiting my classroom were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So take a breath. Now, the tell is because what drives that energy in the body is our thoughts and our beliefs. Our unconscious thoughts and beliefs are driving it. So the story we're telling ourselves about what's happening in front of us. And it might be, oh my gosh, this child is so disrespectful and, all of
Mhm.
this stuff. And oh my gosh, it's driving me crazy. And if these are thoughts, even if we're breathing, it's not going to slow that down. So this is, again, a practice. So
Yeah.
take a deep breath and then tell yourself something more peaceful, like, I'm loved, I'm safe, I can handle this.
Mhm.
Keep breathing, take another breath. I'm loved, I'm safe, I can handle this. So that you actually are slowing down that emotion. And then you can observe. So they always observe.
Okay.
Observe what's happening inside of you. And taking which allows us to access really our executive skills. And so we can be present where our mind is actually where our body is. And we can take, what is actually happening here. And then P is proceed with, rather than reacting from stress, you can proceed with a mindful response. And that mindful response, you might observe yourself and go, oh, I'm about ready to blow my lid.
Mhm.
My, how I proceed might be, I need to step out for a few minutes here and gather.
Yes.
I need to go walk down the block or walk out in the yard or,
Mhm.
and then come back.
Mhm.
So proceed doesn't mean, okay, now we're going to solve the problem.
Right.
So anyway, that's just the stop.
I love that so much. I love that so much because that is the type of process without, I love the acronym. Of course, I love acronyms because it helps me to remember these things because that is basically what I learned to do. And giving myself permission to know that we didn't have to just react, that we as moms could take that breath and could take that time to process because how many times, I mean, it's just like having a conversation, a heated conversation between a friend, a parent, a colleague. And when you're in the moment and you're just reacting to it, afterwards, you may be regretful of what you said. You feel like, gosh, I wish I would have approached it this way. After processing, we can see it from a different lens. And I feel like that's what's helped me so much as a parent is being able to take a step back to process and then be able to proceed, And like you said, I love that you said to proceed doesn't mean that you have to, everything has to be dealt with and cured right then and there. I mean, it can be, it's almost like proceeding with caution or, making sure that you can proceed the way it's fit to proceed.
Right.
And I love that because I think that's the hardest part is that, we get into patterns and I love that you've even talked about that with so many different things that there's patterns that we don't even recognize as a pattern and
Right.
being reactionary is one of them. That's a pattern we learn to just react or to be on the defensive or, whatever that is. Now, here is what I'm so curious about. I know you work, mainly with women. Now, what happens, and I don't know where to go with this, but what happens as a mom? You're doing this self-care and you're working on this and you are going about this in a way that your spouse may be in a completely different place because this is what happened with my spouse and I. He came from a very different upbringing, and I was kind of, approaching my parenting this way, and this was like foreign to him, because it was very much like there are consequences for your action. There are punishments, there are, And it was hard to come to a place, and this is, a blended family. So that's a whole nother
And we
conversation.
have one too. I have
Yeah.
one too.
Okay, there
Blended
you
family.
go. There
Yeah.
you go. So, so for us that was challenging, and it can still be challenging sometimes. We've definitely learned how to navigate it, but what would be your, thoughts around that when your husband sees it very differently and you're doing this work? Is there a
Yeah.
way to get them on board? Is it just by being the example and showing, but that's not always as easy as it sounds because
Yeah. I love this question, Noah.
ah,
And I think it goes right into how we were talking about this isn't a problem that just needs to be solved.
yeah.
So what I have learned is that solution. So our traditional, our pattern is
Hmm.
to solve this right now
Yes.
because we don't like the way it feels when it's unsolved. And we haven't learned how to deal, manage, connect to, work with those feelings. So we try to get rid of it. And we try to get rid of it by solving the thing that is creating in our perspective,
Hmm.
these uncomfortable emotions, the upset.
Right.
So we've kind of learned that upset, there's something wrong. If somebody's upset, there's something wrong, right? And I
Yeah.
even still catch myself sometimes. I have, one of the grandkids is crying. I'm like, what's wrong? And then I'm like, oh, look at that. It just pops right up.
It does. It does.
Yeah. So that's one part of it, that we need to give ourselves permission that solutions evolve over time. And
Mm,
the beautiful part about that is that as the solutions are evolving, so is the relationship, because you're coming back to the conversations again and again. And so this is a question that I get all of the time with the partner, what
mhm.
if, what do I do with the partner? And you said it's foreign to them. Well, it was foreign to me too. It's
True.
foreign to most of us because
Yeah.
this is a different way.
Hmm.
And why are we doing it a different way? Because now we're learning. We have so much more information,
Yeah.
right? And so one of the things too you said earlier was, we feel bad about, oh, if I just knew this 10 years ago, and
Mhm.
I know because I was there too. Oh, if I would have known that, I would have done it differently. But here's
Right.
the thing, we're always evolving and growing. And so
Absolutely.
that's kind of our perfectionism that's coming in, and the shame of, I didn't do it right or whatever.
Yeah.
But think about it like this. We we upgrade our appliances all the time, right? Like our refrigerators, we have like smart refrigerators now.
Hmm.
And we don't say, oh, geez, if 20 years ago we just would have had a smart refrigerator, my life would have been so much better. I
So
mean,
true.
right? And
Yeah.
even our medical procedures, we have way more efficient medical procedures now.
Right.
And we just don't say, well, if 30 years ago we had this, then it would all be different. Well, that wasn't possible then. And neither,
Yeah.
we didn't have the skills that we're learning today because they weren't possible. They weren't
Yes.
in our
Yeah.
awareness.
Right.
So, yes, you and your partner are going to have different perspectives because you have different life experiences.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because we've also been conditioned to another belief that I don't believe is true, is that as parents, we have to be on the same page. We have to be,
Mm,
I don't know, this force, it's almost like us
right.
against them.
Yeah.
And we don't. But what we can do is learn, how do we have these conversations around parenting? I'm noticing that our parenting styles are very different. It doesn't mean one is right and one is wrong. One
Yeah.
is good and one is bad. Because here's the truth. You are going to have a relationship with your child, with each of your children.
Hmm.
And the relationship you have with each of your children is going to be a little bit different because they're all a different human.
Very true. Yeah.
Your spouse, your partner, is going to have a relationship. with your children, and their relationship's going to be a little bit different with each of them.
Right.
And you can come together and, have conversations. Um, when you come together, though, it needs to be from a place of compassion,
Mm,
a place
sure.
of, I am open to sharing my perspective, and I'm open to hearing yours.
Yeah,
And then you can work with that, because otherwise you come into it with defense.
exactly.
And then you go out and you just keep doing the same thing. So you have to ask yourself, am I truly open to sharing my perspective? Am I open to hearing my partner's perspective? And then am I open to not making one right and one
Mm-hmm.
wrong, but
Yeah,
just having a conversation? And again, you're not going to have one conversation.
exactly.
You're going to have many, many. And at times, if it starts to get to this defensiveness, you can
Mhm.
say, okay, you know what? Maybe let's stop here,
Yeah.
digest this, and let's come back again, and you can make a time, or whatever. um but that is how we work with our partners. It's not about you have to do it this way, because
Hmm.
what that says to them is you're not doing it right,
Right.
you're not enough, and you're going
Mhm.
to screw up our kids. And what our fear is, now I'm learning a new way so I won't mess up my kids, but now you're going to.
Oh my
And now I'm
gosh.
afraid that you're going to mess up our kids.
Right, right. And well, and like you said, this is definitely, I mean, even in our own experience as parents, it was a lot of conversations. And guess what? There's still more conversations because things come up even as our kids get older. I mean, my daughter, she is in her master's for college, and we go, I always laugh at parents that, think like, oh gosh, there's so much worry and there's just so much, so much to do as a parent when they're home. And I'm like, just wait until they leave. Because, you think that, and yes, some things get relieved, you're not schlepping them around everywhere and those kinds of things. Your schedule gets a little calmer. But there are other things that arise and come up. And so the conversations are never ending. And I've actually found, as hard as it was, I feel like we've gotten a good rhythm now. So we do know and we can go, okay, we're exactly what you said. We're going to take a pause there. We're going to just digest, process, and then we'll revisit, because the world doesn't, world problems can't be solved in one day. And but what I have noticed is that it's actually brought us closer as a couple, and it's brought us closer even to our kids, to where as they get older too, they acknowledge that our approaches may be different, but there's actually benefits to both. And we've learned how to compromise. We've learned, there are things that I'll see that maybe I didn't agree with necessarily, but then I'll see like, oh, that was effective. And that was actually good. And he does the same for me, going, oh, because at first, the whole talking to your kids, I mean, again, that was just not something that happened in his home. It was very much like, go to your room. This is your punishment. It just was. And I had a little bit of a different upbringing even at that point, but even just learning as a mom in this day and age and learning that there's other ways to approach things, he's able to appreciate that as well and go, okay. Well, I've never been around that. I've never seen that done. I never even thought about it. And it's really having those conversations of getting curious, and asking those questions of like, well, why, why is that something that you have such a stronghold with? What is that about? Even myself, because there were things that I was holding on to that I didn't want to let go either. I was going, no, this is how it's supposed to be. I want to do it this way. And then it was through him getting curious and going, and why are you holding on to that? And how can we compromise in this? So I
Yeah,
do
I
think that,
love the word curious. That's huge.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because that brings that defense down. If you're
Hmm.
able to be a little bit
Yes.
curious and go, okay, what, how, and start asking yourself some questions.
Yeah. And
And
I
the
think
other
even oh, go ahead, go ahead.
the other thing I just really want listeners to hear is when we're shifting these patterns, even to have the conversation with your partner is going to feel very uncomfortable. If you're
Yes.
like me, having a conversation with somebody was super uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
I would like avoid that at all costs
Mhm.
because, and that's the way I was raised. Don't upset anybody.
Right.
And,
And then we
and
shrink,
so
and that's where we shrink.
right. So it
Uh-huh.
was like, oh, this feels uncomfortable. I don't like this way this feels, so therefore I won't do it, or I'm,
Mm. Great
going
point.
to avoid that by doing something else. And I just want you to know that if you feel really uncomfortable, that's probably the thing you need to do. And
Mm.
to sit with that discomfort, allow it to be there, and get curious
Mhm.
at where do you feel this discomfort in your body? Is it in your
Mhm.
chest? Is it in your belly? Is it in your leg? Where is it? Is it in your whole body? And then identifying what
Mhm.
is that icky feeling? And maybe you just call it the icky feeling for now.
Right?
Name it something.
Yeah.
Because when I first started my journey, I had no idea how to, I don't know what I thought, but what I came to was somebody had asked when I started this training, the question was, well, how do you feel in it? And my answer was angry. And where do you feel it in your body?
Mhm.
And that was very foreign to me. It was like, what do you mean?
Mhm.
So what I realized was, oh, I can talk to children in the classroom and in home about feelings. I can
Mhm.
name them. I can, identify them on our face and
Mhm.
our body. We read stories all the time about feelings. But what I
Right.
realized was I do not feel my feelings. And I'm not teaching my children at home or in the classroom to
Mhm.
feel theirs
Yeah,
and to work with it. And that was a huge game changer.
I bet. Yeah,
And now
it's
with hypnotherapy, now that's part of, my work with
yeah.
hypnotherapy too, is helping people connect with that inner self, because that
Mhm.
can be a very foreign um, topic or concept.
Mhm. Well, and that's so funny because I was like, I know we could go on forever, but one thing I definitely wanted to get in was about the hypnotherapy because I also know that you are certified in that as a practitioner. So, briefly, what is it for those that don't
Yeah.
know, and how does that tool help with parenting and relationships?
Yeah. So when you think of hypnosis, oftentimes we think about how it's been presented culturally as an entertainment, right?
Right,
Where
right.
you're going to put somebody under, then you're going to make them do all these goofy things.
Yes.
Well, actually, actual hypnosis is you you are in full control. You're
Hmm.
just in a relaxed, alert state, which we don't often get into
Hmm.
because we live in a very busy, stress induced environment,
Hmm.
world, and we're go, 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 go. So we're not often in that relaxed, alert state. And from that state, you can better access your subconscious. So all these limiting thoughts we have about ourselves that we don't even know are there
Hmm.
because they were created unconsciously in childhood. When we have experiences, we make everything mean something about us.
Hmm.
And then that gets buried in our subconscious. We go about life as if those are the facts of life. And
Hmm.
they might sound like things like I'm not good enough, or I'm not good with money, or, whatever it is.
Right.
And when we can uncover those things and rework them, then you open up, you actually discover the power you have to create lasting change in your life. And that is super empowering. So a lot of the work I do with hypnosis is to help people connect with those feelings and what is going on in their body.
Hmm.
Again, because we live in our heads, not our body.
Hmm.
So it's embodiment. So I do a lot of embodiment work. And the
Yeah.
other thing I will just quickly say here is that your subconscious will not reveal to you anything you actually don't want it to be revealed at this time. So
Mm.
your subconscious is always working for your highest good. Um,
Mm. Yeah.
so
Love
it's
that.
really a beautiful, relaxing, stress-free experience, that you just, it kind of goes with self-care, that you give yourself that
Yeah.
space to really understand a deeper, just beautiful part of yourself.
Yeah. And that's, and I think that that is what I'm loving seeing evolve, that is becoming, and since I started doing this podcast, since I got into this work, just knowing that there are, there's somatic work that we can do. There's so many different things. I mean, I had no idea how the nervous system was, just such an important thing to understand in living life. And especially because we're in a world of so many things happening at such a rapid pace. And it's I heard someone talking the other day and they were saying, we weren't necessarily equipped, to have the capacity to take all of this in such a rapid motion. So to be able to get into that relaxed state and to be able to do that is a self-care practice. That's what we're talking about, that those are the types of things that go so much deeper and will have lasting effects. These are things that you can tap into to start to use as a practice that you can really feel the shift in more of a long term, as opposed to, it's a one shot deal and then you're done, because these are the things that we can do, that I just feel like, before everyone would say, oh, this is just, that woo woo stuff.
Right.
This is like way out there. Like the people who were doing that were, oh, I heard that so many times, like, oh, those are the ones that are way out there. And I'm going, oh my gosh, now I love that I'm in a space that we can talk about this stuff freely and help break down the barriers of what our perceptions were of these things, and to open our minds to some different ways that you can regulate, that you can have better communication, you can tap into yourself, your subconscious. Even understanding that has been so helpful in my journey. So I love what it is that you're doing. And I love that, because of your background, it has just, brought on this passion to really keep going with your work. I always say, we don't retire from teaching. We just keep teaching in a
Right.
different way.
Right, right. And I think too, another shift is just allowing ourselves to have the support that we
Yeah.
are and we're not meant to do life by yourself.
So great.
And we all need each other's support. I have mentors and coaches in my life all the time. Now I
Yes.
can't even imagine not having one.
Right?
So,
So
and
true.
yeah, so our traditional mind says, oh, if I need help, then I'm doing this wrong.
Right?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
We need to give ourselves permission to have the support.
Absolutely. And I love that too, because, I grew up, like I said, mentioned my father had passed away early on, and we've gone through blended families and all of the things. And I have always done traditional therapy. So a lot of talk therapy, which nothing wrong with those things. Like they all have their purpose. They all have, definitely there's reasons to do different types of things. But I am so grateful that we are able to learn about these and know that we are not alone in it. You can talk about these things more openly now. It's not that hush hush that, oh my gosh, nobody else is going through this. I mean, it's amazing how when we start talking about it, how other women are going, oh my gosh, I want to know more. How can I get into this world? How do I learn about this? And that we're not alone and we're not meant to do it alone as we're walking in this journey. I have learned from so many women like you, and I guarantee, when we met, I was like, all right, I am now going to be in her world. So now I get to follow you and learn from you. And that's the beauty of it. It's just this trickle down ripple effect that
Yeah,
happens. And I think that that's where we then don't feel so isolated as
right.
a woman, as a mom, feeling like we have to do it all on our own. I
Right.
always
And
say
I'll
it takes a
say,
village.
I'm learning from you too. So it's not a
Yeah.
one-way street, right?
Yeah.
We are working and learning from each other. And
Yeah.
really, that is true for any of our relationships, including
Absolutely.
parenting. We get the idea that, oh, I'm just supposed to teach all my kids this stuff. Well, they are teaching us a
Oh,
whole lot of
yes.
stuff if we pay attention.
Absolutely. I love this. Well, Diane, this has been such an incredible conversation. And I know that, there are other moms in this world listening and women that are going to be feeling so much more empowered and hopefully inspired to really get curious about your parenting journey. So, thank you for sharing, just all of your wisdom and experience with us. And before we wrap up, we will have everything in or I hope that we will have everything in our show notes, but I don't want to miss anything. So, where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your work and also be able to tune into your beautiful behavior podcast?
Yes. So I would love to have you come visit us over at the Beautiful Behavior
Yes.
Podcast, which is, on whatever, wherever you get your podcasts.
Great.
And I'll also say I do have a PDF for that stop method. So I would love to gift you that as well. I'm on Instagram at dianesorensen.bb. All my links are there. Also, the links, if you come visit the podcast, links are in the show notes for that too. And then my website at dianesorensen.net. So you can find me in any of those areas. And yeah, I would love to have you visit and yeah, reach out.
Yeah, I love it. Well, again, thank you so much, Diane. And then to everybody listening, if this conversation resonated with you, make sure that you let us know. You can tag us on Instagram, you can share it with friends, because we just want this conversation to be a conversation that we can bring to the masses, because I think that women, we're craving that. We're craving ways to know how we can, you know, show up better for ourselves, be able to learn more about ourselves and to help our children. So definitely do that. And of course, we'd always love to hear your biggest takeaway. So until next time, keep rising, keep shining, and know that the best is right here waiting for you today. Bye, friends. Thanks for joining me here today. Your presence means the world to me. If you enjoyed what you heard, please consider leaving a rating and review. And don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. Head to the show notes and let's connect. Rise to Shine Co. is ready to support you in coaching, collaboration, life tips, or even a coffee chat. Until next time, keep shining, my friends.